Good evening and welcome everyone to today's VBio webinar, From Passion to Profession, Becoming a Professor. Welcome Markus and Max. Thanks a lot for your time. And before you can introduce your own CVs, I would quickly say a few things about VBio. I'm Simon Häusler from the office in Munich. And I'm quickly going to introduce VBio. It's Verband Biologie, Biowissenschaften und Biomedizin in Deutschland. We are the German Life Science Association, a non-profit umbrella organization for all scientists in the life sciences. We are independent and evidence-based. We do advise political and public decision makers on all matters of biological relevance. Here are a few upcoming webinars in the weeks to come. The next one is going to be in English as well. 7th of May, Public Health and Protection of Biodiversity on a Global Scale. The next three ones are going to be in German. Check out all upcoming webinars if you did not already register for our newsletter on master-bio.de. If you are already looking for a job, you can order the Perspektiven, and here is a quick ad for this publication. We have a new edition since last year, and you can order this directly through our website. Just scan this QR code. It's roughly 100 CVs written by biologists in all kinds of fields. And spoiler alert, life is not too short to learn German. So this might be a possibility for you to start. Another thing, we do have an open access special issue of our official journal of VBio. It's about CRISPR-Cas. It's 120 pages special issue. Again, most of it in German. Check it out by scanning the QR code or going on to vbio.de/biots-CRISPR. A few things about VBio membership. Your benefits as a VBio member, you will get the latest news in the life science. We do have a weekly newsletter. We do have a special journal for our members with 4 issues a year. You get free training and career support from us, discounts on science magazines, and you can, of course, network with other professionals and societies across disciplines. So connect with our experts in the field, and not just for you, but for the whole scientific community, because you will strengthen our community by joining us, and you will advance biosciences in general, because you will help us, because if we have more members, we do have more visibility in politics and society, and your support helps us to fund this and many other formats, which are all for free, by the way. So this is an investment in your future. I think it's low cost and high value. So maybe check out vbio.de/Beitritt or just scan the QR code here. For students, it's only 35 euros a year. So join us now. I would be really happy to see you joining in the near future. So this is all from my side, and I'm gonna hand over to Max, and we're gonna hear the first talk. While Max is loading his presentation, just a quick hint, you can already type your questions throughout the webinar into the Q&A function. We will have a Q&A session after each speaker, and then in the end, one big session where Markus and Max will both answer your questions. And now I'm looking forward to your talk. Max, it's yours.
Thanks a lot, Simon, for the introduction. I'm assuming you can see my slide and hear me.
Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
there.
Perfect. And well, thanks a lot for the invitation. It's a great pleasure to be talking to you. And it is kind of an unusual format for me. I'm obviously more used to talking about science and presenting kind of the research that we do. And this is the first time I think that I'm talking more about so the backside story of doing research and how to get into this kind of well situation. And I have not actually any slide on what our research is because presumably the majority of you doesn't really care so much about the exact science and is not into this particular field. But yeah, you'll likely get an idea of what the research is as I'm going to talk you through. So basically, the way I've set this up, Simon contacted me asking me to share about how to make it in academia or to present a career in academia. And first thing is, of course, imposter syndrome and kind of kicking in because what do I have to share? Would my story be of any relevance? But then, I kind of like just thought about the steps that I had as I was going on this journey and thought, well, I'll just share the kind of milestones as they happened and a few key things that went through my mind and a few key insights that I got as I went along. And well, perhaps it is of some use also to some of you. So basically, the way that I've set this up is just that I've basically put here my CV and at least a part of it, and I'm going just through it kind of one by one, not necessarily in the order of how the CV is set up, but yeah, roughly chronologically. But one thing definitely first up, which is kind of an elephant in the room, for a career in academia, certain things you are definitely deserve and others you don't. And one of the things that I certainly did not deserve is that I was born male and pale, and that is certainly something that helps a career in academia undeservedly. It is inconvenient truth, but it's, I guess, good to speak it out. And not only am I male and white, but it's also very much reflected already in my name. So even if I send out my name, just by this name, I guess people already have a certain impression. And well, it wasn't my decision to name it that way, but that's the way it is. And so it's, yeah, I guess an idea to keep in mind that the world isn't necessarily fair and these things matter. Um, my last name was even thought by some people who have a bit of an idea of German, but are not German, that it kind of insinuates some kind of royalty or aristocracy, but it's not actually true. I'm also coming actually from a working class background. I'm a first gen academic, but the outside often matters on CVs. But that thing aside, I kind of now go through it chronologically. And well, I started with, as a high school student, and then also in my bachelor, looking back at my achievements. And then the one thing that stood out to me was that actually my grades weren't really very good at that time. Um, and they weren't like totally poor either, but it was certainly not something that just suggested to people at the time then, I guess, um, that yeah, there's going to be something very impressive coming from my career at that point. But if that is something that happens to people who are in the audience right now as well, who people are maybe worried about grades, then I want to assure you that in my experience, grades that people that have looked at my CV has always been very much perceived as indicative of performance and not decisive for a career at all. Because I think largely or because science is very international, and people know that grades are kind of a poor reflector of performance very frequently. And people that look at CVs often, I think, and when I look at CVs, I look at other things more in detail rather than the grades. And if there are grades that aren't that good, then I guess it's important that you can kind of explain them a little bit. And in my case, it helped, I guess, that I could tell sort of a convincing story that actually was true, namely that my grades improved as I went through my studies, and that I could show that I had excellent grades in research projects. And I think that is something that people look out for. Certainly something that I look out for when I'm getting applications from students, because it shows that you have hands-on skills and dedication. which are typically the two things that are coming into the grade when you're doing a research project. And that is obviously key qualities for a PhD. So if your bachelor grades as mine weren't that great, that's not such a huge issue. Or you just kind of have to find a way, I guess, to explain. So my bachelor thesis was for me definitely a key moment where I realized that science is definitely my thing. And that is not necessarily because of the research that I did there, but for me, it was kind of the moment where it really triggered my ambition. So as I said, my grades weren't awesome at that moment. And I think it's because for me, it was the kind of face-to-face interaction with real scientists that had an expectation and that put the trust on me, that for me was much more motivating than studying for an exam. The other thing that was key, I guess, for my bachelor thesis was that for the first time I started to use programming in a professional way. And spoiler, I'm at the moment an assistant professor in computational biology. So this has certainly had, put a mark on my career in that moment. And yeah, I guess it's something that I really couldn't or didn't see at the time because I always considered myself like a very poor programmer, kind of like a script kiddie that, certainly I thought that this was not of any use later. And it turned out to be wrong entirely. And already in my bachelor thesis, it was valued and it kind of reverberates throughout my CV that this kind of what started as a hobby became more important. So I guess an advice there is to not underestimate the certain skills that you have that kind of set you apart from somebody else. And it doesn't have to be something very obvious. It could be, any hobby that you're doing. I bet I could tell you on, any sport that you're doing in interest or, woodworking. It doesn't matter. Anything that you're doing with passion can certainly help you to connect to also being a good scientist, I think. Another key thing that was during my master already was Erasmus. And I guess if students are in the audience and still considering Erasmus at this point, I can certainly recommend doing that. I personally went to Spain at the time, and scientifically it was absolutely irrelevant, actually. It was, I didn't do any very exciting research there or didn't have very exciting courses there. But it was, for me personally, eye-opening in the sense that for me it was the first time that it was outside not only of of Germany, living abroad, but also getting in touch with scientists outside of Germany and getting to see a university system in a different country. And it was really the moment where I realized how limited my horizon was, that I really couldn't that I really only had an idea of how things worked in this little bubble in Bavaria. I studied in Munich. That I thought I know how the world works, I guess. And yeah, it turned out to be not true, obviously, I guess. But yeah, if one advice comes out of it, I guess, then it's just if you have the opportunity to go abroad early on already, that certainly helps because, again, spoiler, you're going to have to go abroad very likely if you want to do a career in academia. In any case, the master was really where it really kicked in for me that this is definitely what I want to do. My passion for science, I think, really developed there. And in particular during the master thesis, where it felt for the first time like, I'm a real scientist now. People let me alone, do my stuff in the lab. I can write up my results. People actually, kind of trust the thing. They are not going to throw it all in the bin afterwards and going to do it again. And that felt really rewarding. And in my case, there was the authorship of a paper kind of on the horizon. And I guess that is often, but not always the case. And for me, that was a very strong pull, I guess. And it makes sense because having one, and so there was actually an authorship resulting from my master thesis, definitely helped a lot for my career, especially for choosing a PhD, obviously. It was also the moment where, for the first time, I realized the importance of having a mentor. So somebody who is actually invested in you, somebody who sees potential in you and who helps you along. That is certainly, cannot be understated of how important that is, and has had an impact on my career, certainly a lot. On the flip side, there was also some negative encounters with politics and science. So, getting to see what is happening behind the scenes, decision makings, hierarchies, these kind of things that you tend to ignore or think that they're not there. Well, you, I guess, get to see those as well. And I'm not going to go into details about it, but you can ask me about this. Um, and then another thing on my CV is that I had at least 2 education breaks, or at least I put them there. One was the obligatory civilian service, not something I could choose, I had to do. And so instead of a military service. And the other thing is a gap year. So after the master, I went backpacking in India. And just if you're considering this, it doesn't really matter when. Just from my personal experience, this was also never really an issue. It had certainly not necessarily been viewed positively by people that looked at my CV, I suspect, but it was also not something that was seen negatively. But one thing that you should definitely keep in mind is that while it can be very rewarding, of course, for me, it was kind of like a self-finding mission where I think it was good for me because if I hadn't done it, probably I would have regretted it or kind of had doubts about it. And I kind of could start into my PhD with full dedication. But of course, it comes at the cost of time. And while I started kind of in school, always being the youngest in class, now I'm kind of like average, I guess, in my cohort. And age certainly is influencing, factor in how you shape your life. So it's certainly something that you have to weigh. I would say, especially as a woman, unfortunately, it's again, I guess, inconvenient truth that age matters more. You have to kind of maybe consider your life stages a little bit more organized than men have the liberty of doing. But in any case, if you're doubting and you're thinking, well, I'd rather take a little bit of time off before going into a PhD or a postdoc or whatever, just rest assured it can be done and it's not necessarily a big issue. Another thing here on the slide is the languages. So for me, the being kind of comfortable in many languages was always very useful. And this is, of course, particularly important for English. And I guess that's also not news for anybody, but it can really not be overstated. English, being able to speak, to write, to present in English is incredibly important, and you'd have to do it all the time in a scientific academic career. And thus, setting the groundwork for that early on is really important. So whenever you get the chance to practice or to, again, go abroad to practice and study this, it is really very useful to do so. Okay, so then I started my PhD, and that was again a moment. I mean, PhD in general is kind of like the key moment, I guess, in an academic career. It's kind of the make or break, I guess, for many. For me, it was a moment where I left Germany, and it was a conscious decision that I never regretted. And I guess many people in that case decide how to choose the perfect supervisor for a PhD. And I think the 3 key things that people consider are the topic, the location, and then the supervisor. And I guess most and foremost, people think about topic. Location, I guess, is more of an organizational thing and personal preference. But people tend to go by topic, and that was the same for me. I just looked for somebody in Europe who's doing protein design. But in hindsight, I always give this advice that actually the topic matters less than people think, or at least in my opinion. Because as a scientist, you have a curiosity about something and you think like, oh my God, this is like the greatest stuff. I'm going to study this. But chances are you're going to change your preferences over time anyway, several times already, because you're going to discover that other things are also really interesting. And so I think it is really, you can choose any topic really that is somewhere broadly in what interests you in biology, and you're gonna be able to really get enthusiastic about it anyway. What cannot, however, be changed is the supervisor. And I think if you get the chance, you should certainly consider to choose by supervisor. Or when you're in doubt, but two topics that are similar, choosing by supervisor I think is a very good idea, because they have an incredibly important impact on how your PhD is going to be. You're going to be working together with these people. Whether they dedicate time and effort on you really can change everything. So that is a key advice that I usually give. And then during the PhD, of course, it kind of crystallizes typically to people whether they want to stay or can't stay in academia or not, based on whether they are able to work independently and reliably and write scientifically and all of these things. Which is, I guess, the typical training during a PhD. But a lot of this obviously hinges on things that you don't really have under control, and that is the scientific uncertainty. We have certain projects and we want to carry them out, but then things don't work. And this ability to deal with setbacks, I think, is something that sets people often apart. And of course, if things goes well, it's great, but a lot of people for whom the projects don't go well think that that is kind of the killer, and it means that they're not carved out to do an academic career. But I think that it's not the case. Actually, if you're able to deal well with negative results, it's a very good quality. It actually prepares you very well for what comes afterwards in postdoc, and then also later as a PI. You very frequently be dealing with these things. So besides the fact on what impact this has on your CV, which is another story, but I would never be just set back by the fact if things don't work out. That's not a problem for an academic career, in my opinion. You can certainly catch up with publications in that. And then in my PhD, I was already embedded in an industrial European, well, in a European project with also industrial partners and academic partners. And just wanted to point out that it's really important that you network as early as possible, because that is probably not only in an academic career, but also in industry is super important. I am still tapping the network that I have from my master's, as for example right now, or from my PhD. Very much these are connections that that you keep for life and that you can contact later on is incredibly important. So do network as much as you can, go to conferences, and when you're at conferences, don't just hang out with the people that you already know, just go talk to people on the poster sessions. Always, be the annoying guy that really wants to talk to the big shot PI that is there. People are friendly and they want to talk to you. So do definitely make use of that. And another thing on the more CV related, so I got a cum laude in my PhD, but what does that mean to any of you? Probably nothing. And that is just another thing that I wanted to say. These kind of quirks are kind of country specific. So these distinctions don't really mean much, even though in the Netherlands a cum laude does mean much. It doesn't maybe mean so much in other countries. So that you can play this game where you can either point this out very much or you can not, because probably people tend to a little bit ignore it because in other countries they don't know what it means actually. So then for my postdoc, I went first I stayed a couple of months with my PhD advisor, and that's what I guess a lot of people do, and that can be a bit of a trap. I see a lot of people that then just stay on for many years in the lab where they already did the PhD, because for the advisor it's useful because you're fully trained, you're super productive. But for you, the hard truth, I guess, is that it's actually not useful. You're at this point expected to move and to build your own independent career, publish without your PhD advice and all these things. But I understand very much that it can become a hassle also for me, being Bomba at this point. You just started to be comfortable in the place where you moved to. You won't have to move again. And yeah, hard truth is that if you want to be a PI, likely you're going to have to move a couple of times, and likely you're going to have to move for your postdoc. So yeah, this will be the moment. And for me, it went to Cambridge in the UK at the MRC LMB, and depending on what field you're in, this may or may not mean something to you. But certainly in my field and the people that had influence on my career, when they looked at this, that did mean something to them. And I think that is actually something, when I thought about it, is actually something that I think that is actually a similarity between many PIs CVs, that for some reason, recruiters apparently really like these elite affiliations. And you can see it, I think, with a lot of PIs that be it just for an exchange, but it could be, during the studies at Oxford, or their, visiting scholar in the US at a fancy institute. I think this happens very often, and it certainly helps. It's maybe not great, but that is the case, that these affiliations can be useful. So it may play a role also in your decision makings. And then, of course, in the postdoc, it's important that you show independence. You have to collect your trophies, if you will. Ideally, you get one of those postdoctoral fellowships that it's really attractive for recruiters on the PI level, because it shows that you're able to get your own money. So that is certainly something that is worth to put your effort in, even if it takes away time from actually doing research. But yeah, it helps a lot for the career. So right now I'm a tenure track assistant professor in Groningen. And this is, of course, the moment where it all came together, all the hard work I put in, but also all these soft skills, the selling yourself skills, and of course, the support that I got from my mentors and lots of luck. And that is, of course, really a truth that, there had to be this position in this moment for me to join in this particular institute where I actually did my PhD. So that also, helped. So cannot hide the fact that luck is very much involved in this. But yeah, that's the game, I guess. Um, what's maybe also interesting to point out is that I'm a tenure track assistant professor. In Germany, this might not even mean much to people because there the system is again entirely different. This first independent career stage can have many different names, and it's really confusing, and that doesn't help. But I guess you have to just kind of like find out what this means in the place where you're applying to, because it can really make a difference whether you have, a permanent position already or not, whether you have guaranteed promotion if you perform or not. So these things are really differ a lot, and you have to find them out. And then, yeah, choosing a topics, fashionable or not, interdisciplinary or not, that is something that I think maybe we can discuss more in the discussion. And then to wrap it up, one thing I just wanted to mention that it's really important that you make yourself seen, maybe later more, but certainly doesn't help, especially as a PhD already. I recommend to go on social media, even though it is tough and you see a lot of unpleasant things there. But for me, it has been always very helpful that people on conferences already knew my name just from, Blue Sky at the moment, or because they looked at my website where people said, "Oh, you have this fancy website," and these are things that really help, and then it doesn't cost that much effort actually. And then lastly, yeah, the one thing that is not on the CV, that is, your personal life. And you may be aware of the 2, 3, 4 body problem in science, where all these moves are, of course, kind of difficult if you have, partners, kids, as in my case. And yeah, this is something that is very individual as well, and you just have to find a way to make this happen. The only advice I can really give there is that for us, moving as a couple, it was a good idea to choose a strategic location, in our case, Cambridge, where we knew that it would be relatively easy for both of us, we are both scientists, to find jobs. So I had a few other opportunities in other places, but I knew that, well, in this place, it would not be so easy for my partner to also find something. So yeah, I think in general, this is a very hard problem that remains unsolved, and a small advice there on the strategic location, maybe. And that's it. And if there are any questions, then I'm really happy to discuss them.
All right. Thank you, Max. That was a really nice wrap up of the past, I don't know how many years.
Yeah, 10 plus, I guess.
Yeah, something like this. Okay, so we do have a few questions already. I think one is a really important one because you mentioned, the supervisor versus topic versus location issue kind of a thing.
Yeah.
So regarding this PhD supervisor thing, do you think it's more important to have a PI who is a big name in the field and has a big group, or a more inexperienced one who can offer closer supervision?
Yeah, I asked this exact question my co-PhD supervisor after when I had to choose my postdoc supervisor.
Yeah.
And he was kind of an established, well-known PI, and he said, "Yeah, of course, you should go for the big name," which was him. I personally think that that wasn't maybe his best advice, even though he typically gave good advice, because it can definitely help. And for example, if you have the opportunity to go to a Nobel laureate's lab, that is incredibly useful. So even if that person is known to be, not a great supervisor, unless you have some really bad red flags, this is such a great, pull, such a great, thing on your CV. I think it boosts your chances of getting a Nobel Prize yourself by 100-fold or something silly like that. That it's hard to say no, and that might be a good reason. But other than that, I would really say when you go to the interview, the most important thing or part of the interview is when you get to talk to the other lab members, because then you should definitely grill them about how this person is a supervisor, because at that point, I think it's less important whether somebody's a big name or unknown name. What matters more is whether they are good supervisors. So whether they take the time to, whether they are supportive, whether they are, they can be relied on, backstabbing or any of these kind of things. And I have heard stories like that when I was doing interviews from people in those labs. And then obviously I didn't go to those labs. So it was really important that, I talked to the people.
Yeah, I think you already described it as a make or break time in your career. And I think it's, a PhD can be very, very long if your supervisor is not treating you well. And, then it doesn't give you anything if you don't even make it till the end, if your PI has a big name or.
That's very true as well, yeah.
All right, then you mentioned you stay abroad in Spain. So Celine is asking or stating first, everyone always says going outside of Germany is basically mandatory. She is a PhD student currently, and she's struggling to find the finances to do that. What are your suggestions? Would a short stay also already help in that way, or can you recommend something? You said you went with Erasmus. I think that's for students only, not for PhDs. Is that right?
Yeah, that's true. But there are certainly also grants that help during a PhD to go visiting. These are certainly not that that easy to find sometimes. They're kind of specific for fields or maybe for a certain network that your PI or the PI where you're going are in. So they are more tricky to find, but it certainly helps to just reach out to people that that you think are doing interesting stuff. And whether a short visit kind of compensates for an entire career section abroad, I'm not so sure. It may depend again a little bit on the field, but I think in most fields it's probably kind of expected at least one of the stages is in a different country. You can probably get away with it, but it is rare. So, for a postdoc, I don't know what expenses you mean, but you get, a better salary for certain than as a PhD in Germany. So you should be able to, afford decent living somewhere. For example, in the Netherlands, salary is certainly quite nice. And in the UK, it was also decent. So I would recommend doing it. Even, of course, yeah, it's not going to be the same salary as, if you go to an industry job, likely. And so maybe you're going to have to, I don't know, share your house, maybe not necessarily, but, live in a somewhat smaller apartment for a little bit longer. But yeah, if you're looking at an academic career, this is, I guess, one of the sacrifices you will likely have to make.
Okay, and would it be a good tip, if you didn't do it until your PhD, it would be a good idea maybe to look in the network of your PI if there might be someone that you could collaborate with during your PhD project, and that might be a possibility to get away from your current lab for a while.
Sorry, I was just interrupted by my little nephew, but can you just repeat the last part of the question?
I mean, if you are already in your PhD and you want to go abroad, it might be a good idea also to look for collaborators in the network of your PI that you could go for a research visit, for example.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, that's anyway, I guess usually a good idea to tap the network of your PI or mentor to, and if they don't come up with that themselves, it's always a good idea to also kind of challenge them and kind of request it from them and say, do you know somebody who I could go to? And typically there is a network that you can tap into. These short-term visits, I don't know how frequent they exist. During the PhD, that should certainly be possible. Afterwards, yeah, if you're talking kind of research internships after a PhD that were like a short postdoc, that may not exist so much. And it's also questionable how productive it'll be. because yeah, in the end, you should probably then also show something for that visit. So if you're thinking about a publication, well, it's likely going to take at least a year or so. So there it might be a little bit more difficult. But I mean, as I said, getting a fellowship anyway, that's kind of really a very nice trophy you can put on your CV. So if you're towards the end of your PhD, you could also consider to talk with your advisor, current advisor, or to reach out to other people, whether there would be some time that you can set aside to already start writing on a proposal, perhaps, that way you could get your own funding then for doing a postdoc. I mean, that is certainly very, very useful.
All right. Then Nicola is asking about how did you get into your junior or assistant professor position now? Because you went back to Groningen, maybe you can elaborate on this a bit further.
Yeah. So in my case, it was I guess so. Yeah, there the major piece of luck that I had there was that the timing worked very well out. In that a position opened there in the department where I did my PhD, kind of exactly at the moment when I was early into my postdoc. And so then the department actually reached out to me saying, "Hey, we're going to have this position open. Are you possibly interested in applying for that?" And so I guess that is, that doesn't really help many people because that is a really rare situation that this exact opening comes from somewhere where you have already been. Maybe in Germany, people are playing more that game while I'm staying at an institute already for, I don't know, quite a longer period of time, waiting to see whether then something kind of appears, and then I will be recruited internally. But I'm also being told that the internal recruitments are always kind of a hassle, and then sometimes they don't happen at all, or they are kind of like not seen very well. So I guess it's also not necessarily the best strategy to bank on that. So I think the most common thing is just as it is the same as for PhDs or postdocs, that basically, you look at the job market, you see where openings are, and then you apply for them. Often, of course, there will be situations where the committee might already have a certain, preference, and you have to play this annoying game of like, I'm applying for a job where, it's hopeless because they already know who they're going to choose. But that is also true for other positions. So, this happens also in other situations, and you just have to, play the numbers game and send out many applications. But certainly, if you can tap your network and get some insider information, that is certainly very, very valuable. So again, just reach out to the people that that are in positions of power. Ask them whether they have insights, whether they can connect you to other departments, and see if you can get another foot in the door. But yeah, this is certainly the most uncertain career step, and the most difficult one, and the one where luck plays maybe a bigger role than in other ones.
All right. Thanks. Moritz is then asking two questions. And the first one, Moritz, since we have Markus here giving the next presentation, and he's a professor in Germany because he's asking about how to secure a tenure track at a German university. And I think we're going to hear about that in a few moments. But the second question I think is really interesting, Max, because did you ever think about moving towards industry, especially given your background? That sounds like an intriguing option. If not, what makes academia so worthy for you to stay in?
Yeah, so certainly have thought about it because it's been always there in my mind, and I think that's valuable for everybody as well. That an academic career, counting on it is probably a bad idea because there's so much uncertainty that you kind of should be prepared on the possibility that it just doesn't work out, and thus having a plan B and thinking about what other jobs you could be doing is certainly a great idea. And for me, actually, I've been kind of pragmatic with this as well, in that the topic that I chose for my my research actually played a role with this thought, because I'm doing very applied biochemistry actually, and I know that if I have to leave academia, then this would not be the most complicated field to find a job in industry as well. So, well, if you have already kind of found your niche, then maybe this is not a good advice anymore. But if you're still at the beginning and you want to hedge your bets, it could be a strategy like this to choose more a topic where the opportunities in industry are also there. For me, working in academia is really great pleasure and really a dream job, I have to say. And that's largely, and I think you have heard this probably before, largely because of the freedom, because you can really just work on those things that interest you rather than people telling you what you have to work on or what's the next kind of goal that you have to achieve. And you don't have to fulfill any economic interests. You don't have to do research because it potentially makes a lot of money. And you don't have to drop something because it doesn't work out after X months, and then your milestone is not met. You can continue doing just the things that you really find interesting, that spark your curiosity.
Right, perfect. I think there was a misunderstanding at the very beginning when you talked about your the many names you have, because Osman, a Black African, didn't really understand, I think, what's the relevance of your color in the CV. Maybe you can clarify that.
Yeah, I mean, that's of course thin ice for me. But I think what I just wanted to say is that I am in a position of privilege because I was born in Germany and I have a name that sounds already very German. And so when I go abroad and people see my CV, then if they are biased, and I think studies show that basically everybody is biased, then that has probably given me advantages throughout my career. And so it's nothing that can necessarily help you because you cannot change your name. You don't really have an influence, but it's just something that I wanted to point out that unfortunately the world is not entirely fair, and it's something that you have to possibly deal with. So it's just something that you have to be mentally prepared for. That you will potentially be faced with discrimination in academia just as much as in any other field. And I think in general, scientists tend to think of them as more as tolerant without any prejudices or biases, but probably in likelihood it is still there. But I hope and I see also that people are making efforts to be better, to do better on this, and we all have to work together to do so. But yeah, I guess it's still a rocky road.
All right, thanks for clarifying that. One last thing, one last question, Max, and it's about your specific field, because Daniel is also interested in theoretical or computational biochemistry and was wondering how important is it to have a portfolio that showcases coding skills like small projects, GitHubs, a repository, etc. If so, do you have any tips?
Yeah, so personally, this is a very good one, and I'm not maybe the best one to ask because I'm actually doing poorly, I think, on background checking people on that. I don't have a good system of doing that myself. Um, Back in the day, I guess, yeah, that's a bit of lie, but I mean, certainly when I did my bachelor thesis, GitHub was not a thing, I think. But at this point in time, it very much is a thing. So if you have a GitHub page, then definitely that makes sense to brush up a little bit if it's at the moment of applying, where you can. It's probably unlikely that people are going to go very much to the code, but they might click a little bit through your repositories there and having them, a nice README there that people can scroll through in 5 seconds, and it shows that there is something that somebody made an effort. That definitely helps, I would say. But besides that, I think it's just something that comes with your general description of the research experience that you have. So if you show that you have done a research internship that was, for example, purely theoretical in a, I don't know, bioinformatics lab, then I guess the people who look at your CV will not then need to see the actual code as well. It's enough that they see, okay, this person has done, you know, 6 month project in this field. So then that is testament to them being able to code likely, or to at least be able to, you know, work with scientific software.
All right, perfect. I think we keep the other questions for the common question round, and I'm looking forward to Markus' talk now.
So thank you. Just let me briefly share my presentation, and
yes.
I hope this is working well for you. And so yeah, welcome and good evening. Suffice to say, you will hear a lot of the same story that you already heard from Max, maybe with some small deviations, but more or less we have a lot of things in common, also along the way, how we got to the place where we are currently. So that's me, getting the elephant straight out of the room. As Max already pointed out, married, 2 kids. That, of course, has impact on some aspects of decision-making, particularly where to apply to, where you can move towards. Also important from my own experience is what kind of focus areas you have, because this already streamlines to which places you would like to apply to from very early on, for your postdoc, for your first group leader position, or for instance, then for your professorship, if you want to stay in academia, or even if you want to go to a company, you have to know what the company provides that's interesting to you and that also feeds your own curiosity. And already, as we pointed out, and so was already pointed out by Max, reaching out, being visible to members, to peers, to people of interest to you, or which are interested in what you're doing. You have to be visible on social media and, for instance, home pages. Your own ones you can host by different providers is, of course, a large benefit. Along the way, as our kind of structure is slightly different, many different things which do influence your success in order to get to the point where we are today. And one is your social network and your team. And here I'm just highlighting my current team in Munich. But the team which already kind of set the scene for me already happened very on during my diploma work and later on from my PhD. My postdoc compatriots, I'm still in touch with most of them. So they were fundamentally influential into the person I am today, how I treat people, how I interact with them, how I do communicate. Ultimately important to research is, of course, funding. You have to have funding. Without money, life becomes very problematic, particularly for academic research. And already what you heard from Max many times before is your network. You have to have a network. You have to reach out. You have to talk to people, get them interested in what you're doing, or they can contribute to your own work later on so that you can get help. And it's true, the more the merrier, and science is a very complicated endeavor. It's a very complicated job. So you need experts, and you can't be the expert in every single field. But you will find people in your network that are more than happy to help you along the way and to achieve your goals and your projects. So I will briefly take you along the road from my very early university days till my professorship, which is a tenure-track position, mind you, which I just got 1.5 years ago. So I'm kind of 10 years later to the game than Max was. And I started off in Karlsruhe. So I was born in Karlsruhe, funny enough, and then the Z4S, so the central government agency who distributed the students in Germany, they put me back home, despite I didn't want to, because I wanted to study oceanology. So because I was into diving, I wanted to do something with oceans, but they thought Karlsruhe might be a better fit for me. So I studied biology at the campus south, so at the university campus, and I've done my mains in zoology and genetics, and my minors in microbiology and organic chemistry. And same story than Max, I've been more than at best an average student. At one point during botany lectures, the professor called me out and he told me they only want to have highly motivated students and I should think about my choices. And that kind of was a really harsh wake-up call very early on. This was 98, 99, in my undergrads already. So, but suffice to say, something apparently has clicked. So I went through with my studies. And then I joined the Campus North, which was back in the day, the Helmholtz Center. Now it's part of the KIT. And there I joined the team of Peter Herrlich, who was is an esteemed geneticist in Germany. and his group leader in Karlsruhe, which is Olivier Cassel. And I enjoyed it so much that I actually also stayed for my PhD thesis. And the reason being that the project they offered me was very much along the line of my interests. So, and during my diploma time, during my study time, I made a 4-week practical course at the genetics department, and that kind of got me completely hooked. What you can do with genes, with molecular biology, that you can arrange stuff, make new proteins, and you see direct response in cells, particularly in tumor cells. That kind of really got me intrigued. So cancer research is the absolute core that drives me every day. And Olivier was a fantastic supervisor. He was very patient. He gave me all the support. We had coffee breaks. We were sitting outside, chit-chatting, small talking, but also talking science. And he really put a lot of time and effort into nurturing and training me to become a full-fledged researcher. At the same time, what is important is that you go to meetings, that you meet people outside the place where you are, because this can already initiate your next step in career. And then it's always good to know the perks of your supervisor. So I knew that Peter is every Saturday or Sunday at the Institute, walking around, checking if people are there. Mind you, this is more than 15 years ago. So I knew he's there, so I kind of waited for him, went to his office, knocked on his door, and I was scared. He was a very prominent person and also very intimidating. I stepped in and thought, Peter, I really would like to go to a meeting. I want to meet people and I want to learn more about science. And sometimes you have to be lucky, and as already Max pointed out, there's luck always along the way. Peter was organizing a FEPS Spitze summer school back in 2007. And he invited me to join as a PhD student. I had to apply for it. I was chosen, so I could go. And the fantastic thing about the Spitze summer schools was that this is a very intimate setting. There are just around 20 students with 15 world-renowned researchers. And it's very close. You can talk to them on the beach, have all kinds of conversations. It's a one-to-one mentoring setting for 5 days. And this was mind-blowing. This made all changes. Michael Carrin, one of the large NF-kappa B researchers, was there scuba diving for urchins, cracking them open with his nice knife and eating them. There was Axel Behrens, at the time at Cancer Research UK, talking about neurotumors, glioblastoma and mouse models. And Peter, back in the day, gave me advice, if you want to do a postdoc, do it in cancer or do it in neurobiology. And Axel kind of really fit the bill. And also people like Carmen and Walter Birchmeier were attending, or Erwin Wagner, so geneticists all the way. And back in the day, again, priming researchers, particularly in the European setting. So afterwards, I came back. I concluded my PhD. And usually you should start to apply slightly earlier than your last day. So I started 3 months earlier. And I sent one application to Axel's lab because I really wanted to join it. I got invited because he met me in person before, and I had a very mediocre CV. I had one publication with an impact factor 3 journal, but I got invited. I went through a 12-hour interview with his team and himself. I came back, and 2 months later, I got the offer. 6 months, and in that time, I have to get my own funding. That was the catch. But it went through. It worked well for me. So I had the chance in August 2009 to join Axel's lab in London at Cancer Research UK, LRI, which now is the Francis Crick Institute in central London. And what I learned from Axel, and this is also a point Max brought up, networking and the institutes you're joining are so important because they do nurture you. You build your networks and you learn, you can thrive, and you set everything up for your next career steps. So here I got a full training on things usually I never wanted to work with, which was Wind, P53, and ubiquitin. As a student, they completely put me off, but this was career defining for me. And this is what I'm still doing today. So here I got full training on mouse models, on genetics, CRISPR. We started CRISPR very early on, also in mice. And one of the advantages also is because it's such a prestigious place and it's such a large and well-renowned lab till today, is that it is maybe slightly easier to get third-party funding. So as a postdoc, I got a PhD, postdoc fellowship from the DFG for 3 years. And afterwards, I could secure a Cancer Research UK fellowship to fund me for another 2 years. So overall, I had a fully funded 6-year postdoc period with Axel in London. And again, during that time, because of the place where I was, again, this is a very similar story to Max, is the people you meet along the way are networks and partners, which are still people I can build up on today. So I met and also published together with Julian Downward, one of the first researchers working on EGFR and PI3 kinase-driven tumors, particularly lung tumors. Eric Sahai, who is an outstanding researcher with microenvironment, tissue structures, Owen Sampson, who's extensively working on colorectal cancer, Charlie Swanton, he's a medic, he was previously part of Julian Downward's team. He defined tumor heterogeneity and tumor evolution. Vivian Lee, she was with Hans Klevers prior, so organoids, colorectal tumors, group leader now at the CRIC. Nilaria Malanki, who's working on immune signaling and how this affects tumor growth. And these people you can only meet, or you easily can meet them in the right places. So you just go with them for coffee, pitch your idea, get them on board with your own project, and you can just call, I can call them still today, and I still do. This is exceedingly helpful. What you should also consider, and this is something I can only strongly recommend, is to get training. So leading people later on. So if you are on the brink of making your next step, your next move, if you do consider to lead people to become a PI or even a project leader, you might want to get professional training. And this is what I've done. So overall, I've done now 4 or 5 different trainings. These were the 2 I've done during my postdoc period in London. One with the Royal Society of Biology, and the other one with Leadership in Action, which was a professional provider for leader training. It's, for instance, here you can go to EMBO. They have an exquisitely good training course for PIs, or if you want to become a PI. And this is something you really should look into very early on, because you learn about yourself, what kind of character you are. And this also tells you what kind of people you should recruit, because we all have weaknesses. We have a lot of strength, but also weaknesses, and you have to compensate these at one point or another. So what's also critical is that you go outside, that you promote not only yourself and your science, but that you, again, grow your network. And this is something which stays with you throughout your career. So as a postdoc, I was able to go to plenty of meetings, to present our posters, to give talks, to talk about the models which we have. And there Martin Eilers in Würzburg got interested in the lab in London and in me, because he was working on a molecule that controls one of his favorite transcription factors. And we could do mouse. So we exchanged the mouse, we published 2 papers, and I received an offer in return to join his department as a junior group leader. And as Max already also pointed out, there are different ways how you can get a foothold in the independence game. And I got an offer. It was nominally a postdoc salary. It still stayed till the end when I left Würzburg. At the beginning, it was a 2-year rolling contract. The last 2 years in Würzburg, it was a permanent contract. But the advantage, it was the first time that I could become fully independent and pursue my own research. And this is a very intimidating process and sometimes overwhelming step, particularly early on. And it's really tough at the beginning. There's no sugarcoating. From postdoc, where you are part of a network, suddenly you are the boss and you make the decisions, and you have to take care of people. And this is something one cannot underestimate. So the first year, I struggled to secure funding. I had 1 technician and 2 master students. And even today, I have to admit, I'm still on the bench. But in these days, I spent 6 to 8 hours a day on the bench, because I was my own best postdoc, pushing the projects further and to get projects started, and to also get enough data to apply for funding, which in the end, also this is something you have to deal with, are rejections, particular funding rejections. So funding rate depending on funding body between 20 and 30%, but they will come through. You just have to reiterate the funding proposals, or what you can also do is you can join a consortium. There are different fashions, different ways, SPPs, GRKs, for instance, or Transregios, SFBs in the German setting. In the international setting, there are comparable systems as well. And as a part of team, again, you have a whole infrastructure that comes with the application once it's funded and once it's successful. So funding went through, the group grew. And the next critical step as a junior PI is recruiting itself. Whom you recruit. This is a true make or break point. And again, I was very lucky and very fortunate that Christian Pretro Garcia, he was my first PhD student. Another PI didn't wanted him. He is a veterinarian, but he wanted to do cancer research, and I couldn't have asked for a better first PhD student. And then came Michaela Reisland. She's now, so Christian is postdoc now in Frankfurt on his way to become an independent group leader. Michaela is in Berlin and in Institut, and Oliver Hartmann, he was also my third PhD student. He's now with me postdoc and my senior scientific officer in Munich. He is my deputy, and he's helping me tremendously to run the lab, and also responsible for all the core techniques which the group uses today. What's also important is throughout the years in Würzburg, we kind of honed our expertise and our skills. So we do, for instance, somatic engineered mouse models for cancer research using exclusive CRISPR. So we don't use genetically engineered mouse models anymore. We do organoids, ubiquitin, in vivo biosensors. And this is important because this is a basis for international collaboration partners to reach out to us. So we can send them our tools, our cell lines, our models, or we do research for them. This again helps, for instance, to contribute to other projects, increase publication output, and have a structure and a network that also helps you in your own research projects to go further. And for your PhDs and postdocs, it's a fantastic opportunity to get to know other PIs, other postdocs, and other groups. What you should also do wherever you are, try to make your own network and outside the box. So in Würzburg, I was at the Biocenter. However, most of my on-site collaboration partners were at the hospital, either at the Interdisciplinary Center for Cancer Research, the Comprehensive Cancer Center, or the University Hospital itself. Pathology, surgeons. So you have to walk around, particularly at the beginning. You spend a lot of time knocking on doors, taking the phone, showing up for coffee, explaining who you are, what you want to do, and how you need their help and their input in order to come to do your research. In the end, this upfront invest will pay off. So then came 2022. So I was in Würzburg for a considerable amount of time. I was on a permanent contract, but what's next? So it was time to move, probably. So I, in total, sent 3 applications for W2 and W3 professorships. I received 1 invitation, 1 interview, and this is my current position. So it was a W2 tenure track position, 5 years, Jülicher model. So the Jülicher model means I do get the title from LMU. So kind of the reverse that Max has. So he started at LMU and I'm currently joined LMU. I have a reduced weekly hour for lecture. I get funded by Helmholtz and I'm a DZL professor. So I do get my salary and predominant group funding from the German Center for Lung Research. So as you can see, I'm wearing a lot of different hats. But sometimes you have to get creative. And this works like a charm because I get the best of all different worlds. And here, Ali Önder Yildirim, he's my current supervisor or my institute's director, and Erika von Mutius, who's also the director of the Environmental Health Center, and which is part of the German Centers for Gesundheitsforschung, where Munich is one of the central points. And this all started end of June. So we're kind of a bit in a hectic place. So the negotiations were around about 6 months. Contract was signed end of June. Whole family needed to move in August that they can start in September. And my oldest daughter also needed to start school in September. So this was kind of adding to the whole hectic process. The lab started in October, and Ollie and also Nicolette Powell, former PhD student, she also decided to join me in Munich to conclude her PhD. So they were the two already setting up the lab together with me. And this also is a massive plus. Once you've set up first time around your lab and you do it again, if people join you, particularly for the very hard first year, it makes it much smoother. But also again here, everything starts all over again. So again, you have to build your network, you have to meet people, you have to make, you have to get the idea about the political landscape you're navigating in. And you should always try to get part of a consortium, again, to solidify and to foster your interaction networks, which you have on site or even outside there. And with this, I'm ready at the end. So again, now at this point, everything more or less hinges on the shoulders of my team. And I'm very grateful that I have them. I'm very fond of every single one of them. And I hope I'm a good PI to them as they are good students. So these are all PhD students, and Ollie as a postdoc, they are to me. Funders and funding, this is something which will be the predominant amount of your time to secure and to get funding and to write grants and applications to keep the show rolling and moving forward. And I can't stress it enough. And again, Max already, you heard it also from him. Your network, you have to work on the people and the researchers you're collaborating with all along the way. You have to expand it because science becomes even more complicated every day, every year, and you can't be a jack of all trades. So you need specialists, and you most likely will have your core expertise. And then you have to have a network which gets all the information you need or the techniques you need in order to do very competitive research. And with this, I'm in the end. If you have any further questions, I'm more than happy to take them.
All right. Thank you, Markus, also for your very interesting presentation. I think we go back to Moritz's question, where I basically only took out his first question, his second question to Max, and we'll hand over to you the first question now. Because, I mean, you also left Germany, and someone else is also commenting, you know, going abroad, everybody's talking about going abroad, but you also need your networks then somewhere else where you want to be a professor. And you both stressed the importance of networking. And but your CV shows that you basically you had a existent network in Germany and then went away for some time and then you came back. Would you say that this is how you secured your tenure track in Germany? Or from your colleagues and experience, do you see other ways of how?
It's a very tricky question because both can be very successful. So I thought with some peers who never left Germany, they stayed on one location and they just rose through the ranks. That's always possible. It becomes harder every year because of recruitment restrictions and how universities are now diversifying their portfolio also with PIs to get new knowledge in. So this can be very problematic. With my stay in London, maybe it was the same for Max. So also from a family perspective, it was for us also the point, do we go back to Germany or do we stay in the UK? Because we have been very well established, networks, science, family was not started yet. So that was a conscious decision that we wanted to go back. But coming as an external, you again start from zero. So in hindsight, I most likely would start to reinitiate the network earlier. So once you know where you want to go, reach out, get in touch with people, and try to set everything up already. Collaborations, meetings, that the location where you're joining is prepared for you, so that it's then easier once you're there, that they know what you need, what you can offer to them, and how they can help you.
All right.
So definitely going abroad or not, personally, I would do it again. It was a fantastic time. I would not miss it for anything in the world. But it's a very tough decision to make.
Okay. And again, question about the German system. What are the differences between W2 and W3 professorships?
Oh, that also depends on the federal state you are in. So in Bavaria, for instance, W3 means head of department and chair. They have the final say in nearly everything. W2, you're one tier below. If you go to Baden-Württemberg, I think they don't have W2s anymore. It's all W3, but then either with department or without department. And it also comes with seniority and with pay. So W3 is the highest level you can achieve. And this is the predominant difference. From a lecture perspective, or hours you have to make, they are more or less comparable. And there's also an age cutoff for W3. So you can only be W3, I think, up to 52 years of age till you get the certificate. Afterwards, you can't be Verbeamtet. So you can't be civil servant anymore.
All right. Talking about contacts, I think it's very nice how this anonymous participant put it. Let's put it in contact. Is there a way to get in the group of you, Markus? And I think, you know, you can say a few things, but also there was someone else asking about this. I would kindly ask everybody, because you can find Markus online and contact him. I think I saw on your lab website that you're actually hiring currently. Maybe you want to advertise in a sentence or two. But other than this, just email Markus, I guess.
So usually when we do hire, I look at the application, people will meet me, and then I send them over to my team. And usually I do recruit together with my team, because the overall social aspect is actually not unimportant, and it needs to fit. And then the next step would also to talk to my colleagues, to my peers, and then this overall would give an insight if someone would be recruited or would be put forward or not.
All right. Then Max mentioned this, you know, languages are important. Do you know how it is in Germany? Do you need to be fluent in German to become a professor?
That's a good question. I actually don't think so. As long as you're not in one of the more classical faculties, more science oriented, that should not be a I don't know. Let's put it this way. So depending on the university, you might have to give lectures in German, particularly in the medical faculty. Medical students have the right to be taught in German. So this could be, for instance, an issue for some of them, depending on if you belong to the medical department, like my group, so I'm part of the medical faculty, or if you're within the biology department. That could, yeah, this could already have impact with regard to recruitability on a W2 or a professorship level. If you might need to take classes or have someone else on your side who could cover your lecture series.
Okay. All right. So Nicola is asking, I think you mentioned in the very end that you are on a 5-year contract now. So how does this, you know, what is your perspective after this?
So if I do get tenure, then it stays on. So the W2 will then become permanent, including the co-funding, which will stay, and the positions which do come with the professorship. If not, so the tenure evaluation usually will be initiated after 3 years, latest after 4 years. If you have one final gap year where the decision will be made if you have to move on or if you can stay. So with the Jülicher model I'm currently on, if, for instance, I do fail the tenure track, then I would also lose the professorship and I would have to move on and apply for jobs elsewhere. If it goes through, then it's a fully fledged professorship.
Okay. Okay, thanks for clarifying. Sorry, do you want to say something more? No, okay. Just a footnote or a side note. I did ignore a few of your questions. I think they are a bit out of scope. I would kindly ask you to look on our YouTube channel, because we do have a lot of webinars about a few things that are not in focus today. And I would go through the remaining questions now, and maybe if we still have time, we can look at the other ones. So one last one about, where was it? Here. Moritz was asking a good question. I think Markus. So you did training on how to become a PI, or basically a leader, not really a PI. I think leadership skills you mentioned. So anything else that comes to mind, specific programs such as Immunonkologie or others, how to stick out of the crowd, how to succeed?
So this all depends on this. So if a postdoc is asking, I think the Immunonkologie is already a very good highlight. It's very competitive to get. I did not get a single outstanding grant, mind you. From my perspective, my experience, this of course opens doors. It makes people stand out of the crowd. The other possibility you always have is you come from a very large lab where you have published really well, or you have a technique and you're the master of this, which is in high demand in a particular field. So there are different ways how you can play the system and stand out also from a CV perspective. Again, it always depends on the career stage. So like Max already pointed out, when a master student comes to me, I don't care so much about the grades. Having been there myself, it's all about commitment. And when I talk to them, do they understand what I want from them? Do they understand the problem, the scientific question? And then I would like to see would they address it with the tools they already have at hand. From a postdoc perspective, this would need to go into what can they contribute and how can they evolve further on, and where are they coming from? And as a PI, I think it's very important either, yes, if you can secure Immunonkologie or ERC starting grant or Max Eder in the German setting, particularly for the medical faculty, that's outstanding. If not, it's always good also to reach out to people prior to applying. I mean, for the whole professorships, you always have the contact persons. You should always get in touch with them and have a Zoom conversation, or even try to travel there if it's not too far, and make yourself known. That already can be a game changer.
All right, perfect. I think we're going to have one last question only to you, Markus, before going to asking the remaining questions to both of you. I think it's a very interesting one. Actually, I never thought about this. How often do tenure tracks go wrong and do not finalize in a full professorship? I have never heard anyone talking about that.
This is something people don't talk about. That's very true, but it happens. It really does. So it happens with Heisenberg professorships. It happens with tenure tracks. So usually when you're recruited, it's not the purpose to sack them or to get sacked. So usually you are recruited to be successful, and the framework which is given to you should ensure that you can make it. Of course, there are life circumstances that can always happen, or projects. Recruitment can be an issue that you just struck bad luck with the people you hired. It is a possibility that a tenure track will not be seen through. Yes, the numbers. If you're interested in numbers, I have to admit you might want to talk to the Deutsche Hochschulverband. they usually track this and they might have some updated numbers for you. Unfortunately, I don't.
All right. Okay. So I think we're gonna go through it just from top to bottom now. So it was addressed to Max, but I think you both can have an answer to that. So Rebecca wrote that her supervisor is pushing her to finish her PhD in 3 years, and she doesn't think that this is a realistic goal given the requirements of her PhD program. Does the duration of a PhD make a difference or have a big impact on your academic career? Max?
I tend to think that it does not make such a huge difference. The term duration is, again, similar to something else that I've said, because also it is so vastly different across countries and maybe within countries and institutes and so on, that the people don't actually know what was the intended time versus what was the actual time. Of course, if something takes really long, let's say 7, 8, 9 years, that may stand out a little bit. But even then, if you have an explanation for it, it may also still be okay. But the entire different story is, of course, how is the circumstances around it? Like, do you still have funding? Do you still get salary? Can you make a living with those circumstances? I think that is actually maybe what you should ask yourself more in that context.
I fully agree. So actually, the three first PhD students I had, I was able to fund them for up to 5 and up to 6 years till they wrote the thesis. And this also came on the back of the university where they were enrolled, because they had to have the first authorship publication. So if in that particular circumstance, as Max really pointed out, funding is only safe for 3 years, and it's unclear if there will be funding possibilities afterwards, that might be a very strong incentive for the PI to push for a 3-year PhD, despite the project might need longer. Otherwise, all of them got the job later on. So out of own experience, I think if you do 3, 4, or 5 years, also even in the German system, that doesn't matter too much. If you go abroad to the States, 6 years plus is also very common.
Right, thanks. I think the next question from Mats is also a really good one. How big of an impact do you think is voluntary work, or does voluntary work have? For example, like student councils, other biological projects you attend that you don't have to do with scientific research itself, but with getting to know university politics, countrywide science politics, etc.
Markus, do you want to
Max,
start?
do you want to go first, or shall I?
Go ahead.
If your PI is happy with this, I would not object as long as the primary project is still put forward. From a own personal development perspective, of course, if you're interested in the science policy, and this is something my wife is doing, then this is a very good starting point for your next career steps. So you would start again building up your network. You get insights into how things work from that perspective. Again, if the focus would be, for instance, to get your master's or your PhD, this is something which in that regard should come first, but it would allow you to diversify and maybe to make your CV more suitable for, again, the next career steps, if this is something you would be interested in.
All right, Max, anything to add?
Not much. I mean, I was on the student representative council, or whatever it's in English as well. I don't think people that looked at my CV saw this as a particularly game-changing thing. But for me personally, it was very rewarding. So, I mean, I would say go for it if, yeah, as Markus said, if it doesn't distract too much from science.
All right. Then a question about how to get your own funding. I think you both talked about this, and this might be interesting for a lot of PhD students attending, because how do those applications for funding look like? Are there presentations, interviews? You probably write a lot of things. Can you maybe describe your ways in a few brief sentences?
This dramatically depends on where you're applying to. So again, in the German setting, from a PhD perspective, if you apply for Fritz Thyssen or for a DFG grant, Usually you do this together with your PI, and this would be a 20 to 25 page application, usually comprised of different subsections, current work, preliminary work, project plan, detailed project plan, timetable for 3 years, requirement. You have to have a funding scheme and a financial plan that this also is sound. You need letters of support from collaboration partners who would be required to conduct the research. And then it's again, you apply, you will get feedback. If it's not passing through, you usually have 2 to 3 reviewers which will share their thoughts and comments. Why, for instance, they would have rejected your proposal. Then you reiterate the proposal and you resubmit. And this is a cycle we all are going through with project funding all the time.
Yeah, and it's very similar already, like at earlier stages, if you apply for a fellowship as a PhD or postdocs. Maybe worth to point out that it can differ vastly. Some proposals, even for a postdoc, let's say, some have to be, I don't know, 30 pages with lots of details, and others can be as short as 2-3 pages or so. So there's a long list of different fellowships it's worth going through, and if you don't have that much time, let's say, it can be worth to just focus on the few where you don't have to make that much effort. But yeah, of course, sometimes you don't have that much choice, because it then depends also on the country and the specifics there.
So to that extent, it might be worthwhile to talk to your Drittmittelabteilung, so your third-party funding agency at your university, and they should have an overview about suitable funding possibilities depending on which sector you're in.
Okay, perfect. The next one is a good one also. I think we all went to university, obviously, and we know a few professors, but what are exactly your tasks as a professor? How does your job look like every day?
I'm at the Research Institute, so Max, I think you're closer to university than I, or I also Research Institute.
No, I'm at a university, actually, yes. And yeah, so then maybe actually one of the main differences may be that I am involved in teaching quite a bit. And in the Netherlands, as a tenure track, my teaching hour requirement is 30% of my time. In practice, this obviously is kind of relative. Especially at the beginning, if you have to give lectures for the first time, that takes a lot of time, and obviously depending on how invested you are in this. So it can easily also take, I don't know, full time for a few months, let's say, when it is that time of teaching. And that is maybe one of the consistencies in the job, that it isn't that consistent, that it can really change depending on what season it is. As Markus said, a lot of time goes into grant writing, but then again, yeah, this comes, I don't know, there's often deadlines kind of towards the end of summer or so. So then many people write a lot in spring and summer, and then it can again be completely different when it's that time of year when the university councils have more meetings. So then you're more in meetings about organizational duties. So that changes a lot. But I should say the best thing I think about, or one of the best things about my job, is the kind of one-on-one or smaller group meetings that I have with PhDs and postdocs, where we just talk about pure science. We sit on a whiteboard and we discuss how can we move forward, what does this latest result mean, and then that's one of the best parts of the job, I think.
So I'm currently at the Research Institute, so not as close to university as Max is. Nevertheless, I do still do teaching and offer practical courses, for instance, where groups of 6 to 12 students join us for a week or two, learn certain practical skills, and then they write a brief exam, and then they're gone again. And most of the time is either grant writing, as already pointed out, a meeting with my team, discussing science, progress reports, writing papers, reaching out to collaboration partners, attending meetings, a lot of networking, resource procurement, so talking to pathologists, surgeons, that we get, for instance, patient material, ethics applications, animal experiments. So this is something I'm still deeply involved in, the practical aspects of the lung research. So all this kind of wraps it up.
All right. Thanks a lot. The next one is also a good one. I love your questions today. What are the key factors you consider when deciding whether to stay in academia or move into industry? And what advice would you two give someone who's still unsure and exploring both paths?
Explore them. Go to company. Give it a shot. You can always come back, and vice versa. It is not rigid. So let's put this straight out there. There's no first tier or second tier out there. So academia or pharma or vice versa. But you need to find an environment that suits your skills and that suits your personality. So some people like structure. So there may be a more ordered environment is more suitable. Others like to be more explorative. So then another system. So I'm specifically not pointing out either or by name, because both are offered. So in pharma, for instance, you've got, let's put out there a company, nevertheless, Genentech, for instance, who does a lot of basic research. But then you also have with PRED a more pharmaceutical-driven arm. You've got Boehringer Ingelheim, who can do a fantastic research, AstraZeneca in the UK too. And you can find similar structures also in an academic setting and in an institute research setting. So I think you will have to tip your toes into the deep water at one point in life and see what you like.
Yeah, I think maybe one thing that's certainly different in academia and industry is a little bit the certainty. Even at quite an advanced stage in your career, you still don't have a permanent job, and you might have to move around and all of these things. So if this is something that you're not necessarily really prepared to do or you're doubting, then it's certainly good to keep your options open outside of academia. And also, dealing with setbacks and negative results, all of these things, being able to deal with this is some of the qualities you maybe want to check whether you have them if you want to stay in academia.
All right, thanks. There's one more question, I think, and this is a really important one. I'm gonna digest this rather long comment into what I think is the key here. So people do leave labs, people quit PhDs and start anew. How do you think does this impact a career? And do you have advice for people who are in toxic environments? Do you have just share your opinions, please.
So if I might start, I have two PhDs who quit their first PhD, and I'm very happy with them. I honestly couldn't care less. They interviewed, they put up front where they're coming from, why they want to leave, and they convinced me, and I'm very happy to have them on board. So because it is a full-time commitment job. And if you're in an environment that is either toxic, non-supportive, or problematic for any reason, the chances that you will finish are anyway rather dim. So then it might be worthwhile either to seek counseling. You might have a person of trust outside your group, which you can contact about the issues you have, or you can apply and start a different PhD, so start anew somewhere else. The question nevertheless, and this is resilience, so something also Max already pointed out on several times, this is something you always should check before. So where's the frustration or the issues coming from? And then thereby make your decisions how to proceed. But from my own experience and perspective, there's no harm done when you quit and start somewhere else new.
Okay, Max?
Yeah, I tend to agree, but I should say that I have seen, I don't remember if it was in a book or in other advice kind of things, that people that quit a PhD, that should be considered a red flag for hiring people. So it is certainly kind of like an unpleasant situation that some people may perceive as difficult. And so a thing to consider is, of course, that people typically ask for references. So then that new person where you're applying might then reach out to your former boss. So it's something to keep in mind. And I guess a reminder that even if you do quit your PhD, likely it's not a pleasant situation, but if you have the option and you can have still influence on it, it is in your best interest to do this as not unpleasant as possible. So to even, to swallow your pride perhaps, and to, avoid, making, I don't know, too much trouble. And that was actually a situation that I went through, where I felt, disadvantaged at a certain point in my career as well. I mean, I was also very upset and considered, like discussing and like, writing angry emails and these things. And this, in hindsight, it was never a good idea to do. So like, it is best to just, move on, forget about it, and try to then compensate perhaps by, when you're applying new, pointing out, explaining it, I guess, maybe already in your cover letter or in the CV. And then if you expect that the person where you stopped is not going to talk favorably about you, that you then provide perhaps a alternative reference, somebody who has been working with you maybe during that same period even, or maybe in another project, where then that person can vouch for you, saying that, okay, this is not a recurring issue with you, and that is then likely more specifics of the lab where you were.
Yeah, okay. So naming different references is a good idea. Markus, do you have anything else? How to minimize any concerns or red flags to future PIs?
Oh, that's a good one. Recruitment is such a personal experience on so many different levels. I think being upfront and being honest is definitely helpful. Not setting the whole place on fire in any way or means is, of course, also helpful, because again, science is a very small community. I think this is also something which is worthwhile mentioning. So you will always meet people, again, on conferences, or they might be your paper reviewers at one point again. So it's there shouldn't be a feud ongoing. That definitely would be helpful.
And I would also recommend to not trash talk your previous supervisor, even if they were really bad. You should not say that. It's kind of not, I think most people don't see this favorably if, if you talk badly about whomever. They just try to, talk neutral about it, say, you had different expectations, or I don't know. And then you can still explain it maybe in a personal conversation. That is very much possible. You can then be maybe more upfront, but in the application itself, I would not necessarily talk bad about that place.
Okay, thanks. And before getting into a toxic environment, Paul is asking how to tell if a potential PhD supervisor is the right fit, someone who truly support your growth. Max, I think you already told that you should go, when you meet the people, in the lab for the interview, just really ask them, do you have any other tips how to really find your fit, your personal?
Yeah, and one good tip is when you talk to the people, they might not necessarily be very upfront about it. So in my case, for example, it was in a situation where they were directly telling me, well, this person, don't go there. But if they're kind of reluctant, it's always a good idea to say, can you tell me like 2 good things about this person and 2 bad things? And then they kind of, forcing them to say something negative. And then, it might be something kind of harmless, or something where you feel like, well, I can live with that. But it might be also something where you're raising an eyebrow. And then, that gives you maybe an idea. And yeah, you have to use a little bit your senses there and your gut feeling to see, can you kind of do these people, tell me the truth? And also in the conversation with that person, that you might make mistakes there. Your gut feeling is not always right, but when in doubt, then maybe follow it anyway.
Markus, anything to add? I fully agree. I think a definite red flag is if the PI doesn't let you talk to his team in his only, or he always needs to be around. So this should be a confidential conversation with team members, very open, without the PI present. This, I think, is already a good indicator that the relationship is healthy. The second thing you should always look out for is continuous publications. This will be later on important, particularly for PhDs and postdocs. Is there enough output of the lab? And if you're an undergrad, ask for a practical seminar, or if you can join them for a practical course, that you get them to know in real deep detail. because if you meet them on a daily basis, they can't hold back. So they will show their true nature one way or another. And then you can make a very good educated decision if this is the right place for you, or if you seek your lucks elsewhere.
All right. Then coming back to the research interests or the fields. So Max and Markus, you both in your talks, you had a few slides. Max, you rather said, you know, find something that you're really interested in, but it might be not so important. If I got that right, Markus, you said that, you know, I mean, is it timely? You said, I think on one of your slides. How did you pick your fields? Can you give advice? Because Charlotte is asking, she's generally interested in genetics. So what would your advice be for someone who's not really specifically into something yet? How to find their own path?
Markus, you want to start?
Oh, that's a tough one. And maybe also really not easy to answer. So when I started focusing down on my research profile later on, particular for the first group leader position, this was predominantly influenced by my time at Cancer Research UK, from what my peers have done and what the field was able to achieve, but what was lacking. So in this, for instance, there for us, CRISPR was a dramatic game changer. This is now why I put one of the focus areas predominantly on this particular arm from my perspective. What's always good if you check current literature, particularly the high impact ones, this is usually which reflects the current flow of interest, data, cell, and science, which you might be fond of reading or not, but it's always worthwhile to check literature and what's currently ongoing in your field of interest or your field of research, in which direction things are moving. And this might give you good indications how to follow up. I think in these days, AI, machine learning, large language models, all of these are not only buzzwords, but are true game changers. To some extent, if you combine this with a certain set of wet lab skills, this would make you into a very either desirable from a recruitment perspective person, or would give you a very strong outline to start your own career.
Yeah, I totally agree. And, you know, I think that's kind of the classic approach, going through literature, trying to see who's writing papers that you find interesting, who's, you know, writing stories that you find convincing, and then just looking up where those labs are. As I made this point of choosing rather by supervisor rather than topic if you have the choice, in that case, one of the first things would be, you know, reaching out to everybody who you know, whether they can advise somewhere, where have they heard there is a good lab, or and have they been supervised by somebody that they enjoyed very much. Or then simply, you know, writing enough applications. I think Markus said like he wrote one application for a postdoc. But, you know, if you're unsure, then just, you know, write many. It's going to take time because you cannot send the same application to all of them for sure. So it's going to, you know, be a lot of work, but at least you get a diversity of ideas, of responses, of interviews. This is all very helpful. Interview is not pleasant, takes time, but, you know, it's very informative if you go through multiple interviews, and also you get better at it. So then, you know, then you can choose based on your feeling that you have during these interviews.
Okay, thanks. We do have a few questions left. I mean, paper authorships obviously make a huge impact on how you progress in an academic career. What is your impression? Like when, I mean, Max, you said already during your master's, I mean, with your master thesis, I think you had a really high-ranking paper that you were a co-author on. Do you think this is key to success? When are the stages when you should really publish well? Can you comment on that?
Yeah. So papers are a game changer because it opens doors in a way. And that is, I think, particularly important if you are really looking at these elite places. If you want to get, I don't know, a PhD in fancy university in the US, then, or I don't know, at other places where it's very competitive, then you may have something like that to show for. If you're looking at more standard universities, maybe across Europe or so, then you can certainly compensate this with other things. But you definitely have to, if you want to become a PI at some point in your life or in your career, have that output that you have to show for. For me, it was very productive PhD. My postdoc actually not so much, also because there was COVID and lockdowns, and it was pretty short. But it is important. So you have to also push it yourself. You have to be efficient in your writing, because I don't know, if it takes you an entire year to write 2 papers that you need for your thesis, then you might have less publications than you could have had if you are more efficient in writing. So it's also a very useful skill to practice, so that it doesn't take so much time. And then sometimes, of course, it hinges also on your supervisors. You have to be, that insisting person telling, okay, can I get corrections back, or like work already on another paper? So yeah, it is really important. So everything you can do to boost that, you should make use of.
I fully agree. I mean, publication is still one of the most hardest currencies we have in science, next to third-party funding, which you can amass over time. What you can do, and this is also what I'm trying with my own team, that I get as many PhD students on collaborative work and papers as possible to bolster the publication output over the years, that when they do come to the point of having the viva and they're on the job market for a postdoc position, or they want to join a pharmaceutical company, for instance, that they have already enough papers under the belly to also stand out compared to their competitors. If you're on the brink of becoming PI, or you're planning to become a PI, I think the postdoc years should classically be your most productive years. There you really should reach out either to your supervisor, or you can initiate on your own collaborative research projects with other PIs and groups you're interested in your vicinity or outside, as long as it's within your research scope, because this again also is, for most of us, at least from a career perspective, the point when we set the focus of the future research we will conduct as PIs as well.
Okay, thanks. And since you talked about securing funding, how important are connections to industry in order to secure funding? Do you have any thoughts on that?
So,
depends a bit on the field, probably, but in my field, for example, it is very useful. And also maybe in the Netherlands, it's also particular. I guess it depends, maybe also in Germany, but more and more funding bodies want to see that, that your research has directly an implication, and there's knowledge utilization sections in grant applications. So you more and more are asked to make that direct connection of how your research is benefiting society as a whole. And so then, if it has an industry connection, that is one way of achieving that. And so that can be very useful. On the other hand, they can, of course, also provide or contribute to the funding, both in terms of money or in terms of providing expertise or collaborative opportunities. And so that is a very useful connection to have. And it just comes, for me, under the belly of all of these, all this point of, making use of your network, expanding as much, talking to as many people as you know. Because the person who is doing the master thesis in the lab next to you now might be in some company in 2 years from now. You can reach out to them and say, could there be some possible interests in common? Can we do something together? So yeah, network.
Everything said. So I can only refer to, I mean, in the UK, there are different challenges, for instance, and grant cancer challenges, which you can apply to where you would have, for instance, dedicated industrial partners already within the grant proposal. Within the German framework, you've got the BMBF funding calls, which are also very heavy on collaborations with industrial partners. And some of the companies have their own dedicated third-party funding schemes where you can apply to. It's highly competitive, but some of them are truly amazing, including mentorship and really drug designing till the nearly close to the ready product. So this is something you can and should try for, definitely, yes.
Okay. Okay, 2 remaining questions, 10 minutes to go. I think that's a good, that adds up. Is it a possibility, for whatever reason, to stay a postdoc for an extended period of time, or do you have to move on? So is there a limit to the postdoc stage? I think in Germany we do have a limitation, Wissenschaftszeitvertraggesetz, so where you have, but
Right.
that's just to get a permanent position at the university. That doesn't necessarily mean that you need to become a professor until then. Do you have anything to say, Markus? Yeah, please.
So one of the greatest issues in the German system, once you've been abroad, you see the good, the bad, and the ugly. And this is something which we definitely are missing here, which is a classical Mittelbau. So something which you have in the UK, where you have scientific officers, so postdocs, which can stay on that level indefinitely, and they're so valuable to every individual team, which are very difficult to secure within the German funding scheme. So you have the akademische Ratsstellen, which are on top very well funded, because usually they come with an E14 or A14. But most departments, most chairs have maybe 1 or 2 of these positions. So usually someone needs to retire or otherwise get out of the system to vacate these places. So they're very rare, very difficult to come by. Otherwise, theoretically, as long as you can stay on third-party funding, the 12 or now 6-year rule would not apply to you. But that again comes with, as Max already pointed out, uncertainty. So do you get funding? Can you secure it? Can you stay on this position? That's at least unclear to me at the moment. But it would be very good to have, no doubt.
Yeah. Yeah, outside of the Netherlands, outside of Germany, again, it depends on the country. In the Netherlands, I can say these do exist. So permanent postdoc positions, or whatever you want to call it. Maybe it's not called postdoc anymore, but they're extremely rare, and it's very hard to get. So it's yeah, I wouldn't bet my future on it. And unless you have something like that lined up, I guess you should ask yourself whether it's wise to aim for that in the first place, because unless you get this permanent position, then even if you get another postdoc contract, let's say you're already 10 years into postdoc and you have now found another one of 4 years, the question whether it's wise to do so. And I guess more and more people now say that, well, maybe it isn't the best idea. Because of course the problem is that you're becoming less attractive for other jobs outside of academia, and so you're kind of on a one-way path. So it is possible, but maybe not desirable. And another thing to also mention that maybe is not clear, that I think in many countries, at least in the Netherlands, I guess in Germany as well, your salary is linked to your experience. So as a postdoc, you're more expensive if you already have 5 years behind you than if it's your first year of postdoc. So then you're becoming also less attractive to be hired because you just cost more money. Although, of course, if you have experience to show for it, well, it's kind of like a compensation. But yeah, just something to keep in mind.
All right, perfect. Because you talked about salary, there were a few questions, and these are very, very standard ones. You can all look up what someone earns at a university, and there are also ranges for non-academic careers. I put this already in one of the. I answered one of the questions. So on Job Vector, actually, it's in German. Maybe you can click on it now and maybe find, just use Chrome or something to maybe translate for the German situation. I think there's good estimations for salaries. Yeah, Markus just put something in the chat. I repost this for everybody to see. So for all the positions at universities, you can Google TVÖD. So these are Tarifverträge, which are all online. And I think there's you will get a rough estimate on how what people actually earn. So there is someone already thanking you so much for all the answers, and then maybe we can there just came one more, sorry. Okay, sorry, I don't really get that question. Are there any European countries or cities that are more prominent on the CV? Thinking of Belgium. Do you have anything to say about this? I'm not sure if I can really...
Leuven? Is Leuven in Netherlands or Belgium? I always mix it up. I'm terribly sorry.
Belgium.
Yeah, so this would be an outstanding university from Belgium, which at least in the ubiquitin field is well known.
Yeah, I mean, maybe the question is more general on whether it makes whether it's important what the city is where you do your career.
Or the university, yeah, okay.
Yeah, maybe more the institute than the city, but yeah, as I said, also it may be sometimes a strategically good move to go to a place where there's plenty of opportunities if you're thinking about, partner situation. Or also other career alternatives. You also think about what am I going to do after this career move? And if you're thinking about a PhD, 4 years, it does happen frequently that people are after 4 years quite happy in the place that they are and they don't feel like moving anymore. And then if you are, you're originally, let's say, from the US and now you did your PhD in a small city in Austria, then yeah, maybe the chances are higher that at that point you need or want to move again than if you are in some kind of hub where there's already also plenty of other places to then go for a follow-up job. So if that is something for your personal situation, then yeah, that's something strategic to consider perhaps.
Okay, thank you for your really nice presentations and for your personal views and sharing those, your personal stories and how you became the professors you are today. I'm really happy that you guys also stayed until the end, whoever is still in the room. If you haven't checked out the chat already, I put some really useful links, not only how to get a member of VBio, but also our YouTube channel and other links that might be interesting. And one last remark, and I learned this quote from Michael Schaper, who I'm also doing a soft skills seminar again in autumn. I can really highly recommend the webinars with him. He said, he quoted Seneca. He's a Roman philosopher from, I don't know, 2000 years ago or something, because it fits to both of your talks today, because you were both talking about luck, and you can't imagine how many people who are in this panel with me all the time talk about their luck in their CVs, because luck is what happens when preparation meets opportunity. And that's, I think, a really, really nice quote. And with this, I think we're at the end of this webinar today. Thanks again. Thanks for coming. Thanks for staying, and have a nice evening.
Thank you so much. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.